Welcome to Lockbox, a podcast providing real estate professionals with action items for success. My name is Jeffrey Broger, and I'm going to be your host. I'm the founder of two real estate marketing and tech companies, STEEZY.Digital and realnurture.io. In this podcast, you'll learn from top 1% real estate and mortgage brokers the exact secrets to their success. Welcome to Lockbox. Welcome to Lockbox. My name is Jeffrey Broger, and I'm here today with Curt Frost. Curtis, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you start off, tell our listeners who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, Curt Frost. I'm originally from Southern Illinois, but live here in Windermere, Florida, and we have an office in Winter Garden. A lot of growing areas in Florida, so it's a good time to be in real estate in the state of Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a lot of people moving to Florida for many reasons, and we may or may not get into them. But I'm curious, what got you into real estate in the beginning? What was that first exposure?
You know what? I would have to say my first exposure, I've realized I didn't even notice at the time. I grew up, my folks owned and operated their own grocery store. And my dad owned the real estate, and he actually at one time had 3 locations. And his one main location, I just never realized it until I started growing up and getting more into real estate and learning what was going on there between the operating business and the ownership of the real estate. And through that time, I started asking more questions. And for one of my cousins, helped develop a Subway restaurant, just kind of dug in and helped figure it out. And still wasn't really sure what it was I was doing, but I was just kind of had a knack for problem solving, either helping my dad with things in his real estate or my cousin, and then found a group that was doing a little bit of development and just got thrown right into the mix and started learning what all I could.
Nice. Yeah, that's a formative experience to have your father owning some commercial real estate and a couple of grocery stores, and then that makes sense. A lot of times that story is that the father or the mother was a residential real estate agent, and that was the exposure. But on your side, it was the commercial.
Yeah.
So hence the leaning towards commercial now, and of course you're CEO of a commercial real estate firm today, and primarily you mentioned having a stabilized portfolio but focusing on development. So is that you're focusing on retail development in Florida? Is that right?
Yeah, we actually, so from a stabilized property standpoint, we have properties in 35 states. We have active development in about 18 states right now.
Okay.
However, I would say Florida is about where 30% of our business is, and where our more complex and larger projects are. Just with the demand and growth, we've been able to fill a role here in development in Florida. Grocery anchored shopping centers and smaller, our wheelhouse. That's the space we operate in.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like, throughout this entrepreneurial journey that you've had, you've seen success in a few different areas. And I would love to know the single most important action that you've taken on a daily basis that has attributed most to your success.
Yeah. I wake up every day and say to myself, what's going to be changed today, or what do I need to change today? And just embracing the fact that if you think that tomorrow is going to be the same as today, and you think that change isn't inevitable, then it's really, really easy to get behind quickly. With technology entering all sorts of spaces, particularly some interesting stories coming up in real estate and how that might change transactions, just continuing to learn, being a lifelong learner, and embracing that change that is coming. And if you don't see the change coming, then you got to ask yourself, what should be changing today? Because it's likely, a bunch of small changes that if you can get ahead of, you can really establish a competitive advantage, or make sure that you're communicating well with your team to lead them better, and just not being complacent. And I think that's an action every day. Wake up, get out of bed. All right, what's changing today, or what do I need to change today?
Yeah, interesting insight there. And so when you were looking for, development deals, as you mentioned, you have a stabilized portfolio in 35 states, you're actively developing in 18. I'm sure not every single potential deal is coming to you to be vetted at this point. I'm sure you have teams that are helping with this, but I'm just curious in the whole generation process for lead generation process for a new development shopping center area that's centered on a grocery store? Because you're building it. So are you kind of tacking on to new housing development and you're partnering with those developers and saying, well, with this increase in housing units, they're going to need a place to shop and a place to, visit a grocery store and things like that. What is the whole philosophy here of finding out the right land, the right market to go develop this type of product?
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach. And obviously to your comment, we have a fantastic team here and a lot of folks in a lot of different states working hard every day, knowing what's going on in the markets. But, one approach is housing starts, infrastructure, studying where those things are going. And then in the MSAs where you have advanced planning and zoning, they have a pretty good indication on where things are going to go. They do a great job of laying it out. Some communities don't have that moving as fast as what the growth's coming. So then in those cases, we try to come in with the municipality, sit down and help work through it. Our mission is to create positive and lasting impacts on the communities we touch. And so whether or not we get development projects or development business, we're more than happy to consult many times for free, clearly, just because we want to see the communities be developed the best way possible for those residents. And, sometimes we see misses and, that's where vacancy occurs or, traffic issues and different things. And we really, really like to take a hands-on approach when we can and share, our brain trust here. We think we've created of people that really know how to do some master planning and so forth. From a more day in, day out perspective, that's sort of some of the longer range stuff. The more day in, day out, it's your partnerships and your collaboration. I mean, sometimes we'll take the lead on tract of land and we're partnering with multifamily or maybe some bigger residential developers. And then the opposite's also true. If one of our multifamily contacts comes into a larger tract of land, hey, here's what we're doing. We want to leave this front piece and you all come in and do a simultaneous close and we'll make sure that there's services there for those folks as they start moving in. And so it develops many different ways. And I think just making sure that our folks are in tune with realizing that, it's a lot about the relationships and understanding, where the housing growth is coming, where the people are moving and the infrastructure, particularly in your states like Florida and Texas.
Yeah, that's interesting that working directly with municipalities and just going there to be of service, helping them to, leverage your expertise to offer consulting and just improve the overall plan that is in place, especially if they're behind on that plan. I mean, that's tremendous value. And then, of course, you're building rapport and your foot's in the door. So that makes sense to be able to come across that way and be able to win a lot of these deals. As you mentioned, some free consulting comes out of it, but having that mission focus of improving the communities that you're working within is super important. I own a branding, advertising, and copywriting agency. And when I reviewed your website, I noticed that you had your brand guidelines dialed. You had your mission, your vision, your values, the look, feel, colors are all consistent. And so I'm curious at what point you went through that process with this firm.
Yeah, that's a great question. Super fortunate here over the last over 10 years. I've had the opportunity to spend time at Bell Leadership Institute and out in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And through that process, it's really a comprehensive leadership training and engagement program. And, what's the foundational piece of that is about finding your mission. And if you're in charge of defining the mission, well, then you better start doing that because there's a lot of people counting on you and wanting to know what that is. You can work a job, you can, get a paycheck, earn a paycheck, all that stuff. But if there's not a bigger, deeper purpose, then you tend to just kind of go through the motions. And so for me, once I started learning this over the past, I would say about 8 to 9 years ago, how important defining what that was, and then not only defining it, but living it, protecting it, and making sure that it's core and fundamental to the business. That's when it started to click for me. And so whenever I run different departments, before I was in this position, we had a department mission. because that mission has to support the greater mission of the company. And I would say about 6 years ago is when we formalized the vision, mission, and core values of WMG Development. And then the culture of the company starts to manifest itself by the mission. And then I'm the self-proclaimed culture cop around here, making sure that, hey, if we've got a tough decision that we have to make about a project, what's our mission here? And, maybe it's where it's, we came across something unintended and it's going to make the project more expensive. Well, okay. Are we going to be creating a positive impact? Are we not putting the company in a negative position? Right. Then let's keep going. We got to do the right thing. And I think some of those things are really important to see, not only the establishment of the mission, but the establishment of the expectations behind that driving our day-to-day focus.
You nailed it. It's so important. I'm happy to hear that you went through a leadership program that focused so much on the branding aspect. I mean, when you write a business plan, branding is a part of it. When you go through the leadership books like Scaling Up, there's a huge focus on mission, vision, values, and you break down the big, hairy, audacious goal into these smaller, more attainable goals, quarterly, weekly, monthly, that support it. And it's just so common that doesn't happen in business. It's by far the majority doesn't happen, and it's almost baffling. So, I was shocked and surprised to see it. I should go to every single website doing research for a podcast and see what I saw today, but I was glad to see it on yours. So, good job.
Well, thank you. I tell you what, though, that is the truth. And, I think for me too, one thing I think about is, how many times you hear about companies that have those things, but then, you hear the horror stories of like onboarding when a team member says, well, we have these, but we don't really use them or talk about them much. We start every meeting off with our vision, mission, core values. And that settles us in to make sure that we're mentally prepared for what's in front of us and we're staying true to that.
Love that. That's a great way to start every meeting. And it's so quick. It's less than a minute, right? So I'm curious, you're mentioning development and building a brighter future for a lot of the communities that you touch and impact. So, you're looking at a lot of different planning committees, seeing how they're forecasting different growth. I'm curious how you see the industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years. What are your projections? If you had a crystal ball that could tell you everything, what would it say?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, then I might be on a different podcast. I don't know. But, the next 5 to 10 years is going to be interesting. There's a lot of things that I'm starting to look at, think about, read about. We're talking about non-fungible tokens. How's that going to play into real estate? Blockchain technology tying into deed transfers and, stuff that I'm just barely scratching the surface on. I'm sure you could probably educate me better than what I'm doing on my own right now. But the point is that transactions as we know it are going to radically change. And I don't know if it'll be 5 years, 3 years, 7, 10. On the horizon is some radical change from a transactional standpoint and capital. So if you think about development has got 3 pillars: deal flow, people, qualified people, and capital. All right. And typically you've got maybe you've got a team of people who's really good, but they're trying to find deal flow and they've got capital behind them. All those pillars are sort of interesting stories that you hear about when you interview people and what they're doing and how they're having struggles and so forth. And I think that the interesting thing is there's going to be a way very soon for capital to flow into development projects that doesn't have the historical red tape tied to it. I don't know how yet. I don't know whether it's going to be the tokenization of real estate or what that is, but there is going to be a way. It's already happening in many regards. When you think about crowdfunding and some of these other ways, it's just not been perfected yet. I think a lot of the technology we've seen so far is transitional, what I call transitional technology. It's on the cusp of being what we're going to see in the future. I think once that happens, projects will come online faster. I think people will be more capable of delivering at a speed and location and under certain jurisdictions that may have had previous constraints. They'll be more efficient, maybe I'll say. The trouble I think we're going to have to overcome is how do you let people that are not quite capable, keep them from raising the money and maybe delivering a less than desirable result because it's more easily attainable, the capital that is. Is that clear? Does that make sense?
It did to me. And just to clarify for my listeners, what Curtis is referring to is the ability for an average person that is not an accredited investor to be able to partake in real estate investment, particularly new developments and potentially, riskier asset classes that would only be available to, investors that are accredited or part of syndications or have kind of this inside track, hedge funds, things of that nature. And if that were true, if that became a reality, this crowdfunding concept that was accepted as a whole, and you could have an app on your phone where you said, well, inflation's at 7%, stock market's going like this up and down crazy. I'm not confident in that. I would rather put my $500 a month that I'm setting aside for savings into this new grocery store development in New Mexico. And it just auto transfers in. And then, you get a certain percent return that exceeds inflation. And then 5 years later, you get a payout. It's like, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of what you're alluding to.
That's exactly right. Actually, just, you're recording this, so dub over everything I just said, but you're exactly right. And I think the ability to do that on your device, let's just say we've got a new lease coming. Once a lease is signed, you can hit a button. Everybody who's signed up for notifications on that, or whoever's whitelisted or however we did it, gets a notification. Do you want in or not? And
right.
That is an opportunity for that capital to just flow in. Luckily, we continue to fund everything on our own, but as you grow and scale, you want to make sure that you're always relevant. And as your partners need you to grow, you're always looking to say, hey, what's my next option? Should I need it? And I think absolutely this is going to be something in the next 5 to 10 years that'll be readily available.
Yeah. I mean, there's billions of dollars of untapped capital that's just sitting in people's savings accounts, IRAs, retirement accounts, doing nothing. And, if they had the opportunity to vet an investment and then move it over there, and it was at the point where it was more of just an interest payment rather than them even being necessarily a limited partner. It's just like, hey, we know that based on this project and our track record, we're going to yield X and we're going to give you a percentage of X, which exceeds inflation. Do you want a part of this deal? I mean, that hedge fund, the biggest hedge funds in the world have a fraction of their clients' net worth. Imagine having access to the entire rest of the client's network where they could go direct to developments rather than going through funds like that. So really interesting future ahead for sure. And, with that, there may be some bad actors that, create some projects that end up going bankrupt or some Ponzi schemes that come out of it because it's less regulated. So there's that kind of side of it, which is a little bit scary. And that's why the accredited investor cap is in place so that it's restricting it to investors that are more savvy or have demonstrated success. They have the ability to take a loss like that and not have it be their entire life savings. But I think that once we get to the point where it is stabilized and it's at the point where, the risk is in the appropriate court as far as, the risk of the project and the returns and everything, it'll be very interesting to be able to just fund a project from your cell phone, say yes to a notification. And, now, 25% of my monthly allotment that I'm already siphoning off for investment is going into this bucket. And I know that it's growing. It's taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. I move on with my day. Right. That's a very interesting and compelling future. And I really don't think that we're too far away. And I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's close. And and a lot of it will be tied to the credit of the end user, the tenant, and the credibility of the folks doing the development. And I think those are ways to establish yourself as a major player when that space comes.
Well, isn't that interesting? The whole marketplace concept that, places like, just as a simple everyday example, places like OfferUp, if you go on to sell some of your stuff, you could see the rating of that other person. If they're 5-star, if they, have a history, same kind of marketplace concept on Yelp. It's like you're going to go to a restaurant, you look at what other people have rated them as. Well, what if it was as simple as that? There's a star rating and a review process for certain developers. And And, if you have thousands of reviews, 4.5 stars, just like picking my next date night restaurant for my wife, I'm going to go with that one as opposed to the one with 3 stars that, has 15 reviews. So,
and let me ask you, and why is it you would pick that one?
Trust.
Yeah. Trust. And because of the trust, you're expecting performance or a better experience when you go there. And I think it couldn't be more true. If we would go ahead and hold ourselves to that standard of creating world-class experience in order to boost our reviews, that's going to earn repeat business. That's going to earn random business. When you're in a different community, you're traveling, et cetera, people are going to look you up, right? And say, well, hey, we're growing our business now in this market. Who's the best to work with? Wow. Looks like they're, WMG, for example, is operating here in Austin. Let's try them out. They do fantastic in other markets.
Yeah. Can I share something with you?
Yeah.
I recently just finished this process of spending a lot of money and a lot of time distilling down decades of marketing experience related to real estate in order to come up with the number one reason why someone chooses a certain firm over the other. And it came down to one common emotion that needs to be evoked within them. Do you want to know what that emotion is?
I absolutely do.
You already know it. Trust. We just said it, but it didn't have the buildup that it did. So think about it. I mean, this is a transaction on the residential side that is the largest one anyone will ever make. And even on the commercial side, when it's talking about investments, I mean, these are major deals, major portions of people's portfolio. And it's not something they do every day. It's not something that they have the knowledge to do themselves or they would want to do themselves. It has major consequences if it's done wrong. So all of that leads to them liking you, over them, feeling this affinity or feeling like you're the funniest guy in the room, over any of those other emotions you can evoke within them with some kind of message. The number one thing that needs to be certain is that they can trust you. And one of the ways to then reinform that trust is to make sure to stay in front of them, stay in constant communication with them, continue to advertise to them. And it just helps you to maintain that level of trust once you've gained it. Because then the other thing is that they'll forget if, you have one touch 5 years ago, they had a great experience. Now they're ready to invest again 5 years later. If you're not in touch with them, then they'll go with the next person that they just saw recently that they trust. That's the other kind of inherent just nature of the beast when it comes to being a brand of this nature, being an authority brand, is that yes, you can compete with those that are the largest in the industry just as equally because you can evoke trust, to the same degree or more on a local level than they can. But the other aspect of it is that you then need to advertise consistently to stay in that realm. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, absolutely true. And I think when we think about what is our thematic goal here, and we can talk about our vision, mission, and those are true and apparent. If you boil that down, it's deliver world-class experiences, be authentic, be world-class. And if we stay true to that, then we're constantly doing the right thing for the right reasons in the right moment. And that includes communicating well with your customers. And that trust is built on, let's just say you got a big project going on. Hey, customer, this is how we're going to communicate with you. You'll get weekly updates this way. You'll get monthly updates this way, and call me if you're concerned. Well, that's one way to do it. Or you could say, hey, who's your team? How would you like to be communicated with? How frequently? Via email or call? And you're tailoring that communication. When you first care, you show you care about how you deliver messages about something that's near and dear to them, you establish a baseline of trust. Now, remember, if you miss those communication points that you agreed to, you're going to erode trust, right?
Yes.
But if you tailor your approach, it pauses you as a company, as a team member, to say, wait, this is important. I need to slow down to make sure that I'm providing them the information they want. It's not one size fits all. And so that basis of trust, as it grows through this, we had one customer was on vacation reading the updates and said, I can actually enjoy my vacation when I'm working with you because of the update they got. That's fantastic. That's transformational. That earns repeat business. And that's the right way to do it. And it supports what you found in your marketing efforts, that trust is at the core of that.
You and I, Curtis, on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
And when I onboard a new client, part of my partnership questions are, how often do you like to receive updates? On what communication channels do you prefer? Is it Facebook Messenger, SMS text messages, email? What should I use these channels for? And that's part of the onboarding form. And then awesome. We have the clear instructions of how they prefer to communicate and be communicated with. Then it's up to us to then fulfill that promise and maintain that trust.
Right.
But it does definitely separate us from the beginning from other marketing agencies they dealt with in the past that, might become this black box that they gave money to and they don't know what's happening and they have no updates. It's like, if they say they want weekly, all right, we put a meeting on for every single week on the same day, same time, 30-minute meeting for updates, and it's a Zoom. And it's like, that's how they want to be communicated with. And then it gets to a point often that it's too much. And they're like, okay, I get it. Everything's being done. Let's do it bi-weekly. Right. Yep. But if you don't ask and you're like, hey, we do once a month, and that's how you set the precedent, as you said, it's something, but it's not as good as it could have been if you just asked what are their communication preferences.
Right.
And one other concept regarding that as well is writing an instruction manual for yourself. It's so interesting, this concept. I recently shout out to Superhuman. It's an email service that basically replaces your mail app on your Mac, right? And instead of going into mail on Mac, you go into Superhuman, and their full focus is inbox zero. Like, it helps to smartly categorize. It just reinvented email. So that was my initial attraction. But the whole company has really just been awesome at writing these very innovative blog articles. And one of them, the concept was writing an instruction manual for you. And then when you're getting into new working relationships, you can hand it to someone, and it could be one page, it could be however long you want, but it talks about these exact things. How to schedule a certain type of meeting with you, at what times of the week, day, or month are best to, schedule those meetings, at what time are absolutely off limits, no time that you could, have on this day or this type of thing. Like, all these little details that, when someone does that to you, it kind of irritates you. You could just write it into a document and then communicate it to not do that, or to do this, or to interact in this way in order to most efficiently communicate with me as a human.
Yeah.
And doing that one time, it's such an interesting concept, because now you have this instruction manual that you can just like hand out, like, hey, here's the best way to work with me. And you can write it in whatever tone or voice you want, but it was a very interesting concept. And I found that fascinating. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And honestly, there's a lot of times where it's super simple stuff. We just don't take the time to slow down and put it into a form that's helpful for others, and what I ended up doing was sort of the reverse of that, is like, okay, if you don't want to be bothered, I just put a block on my calendar so no one could schedule. And, I think you have to do that, particularly if you're going to organize yourself in a way to accomplish the most with every minute, i.e. superhuman, right? We're all trying to figure out how to be more effective, more efficient. And I think too, it also establishes that bond, because when you don't have things like that, you approach somebody and they're stressed out about, some issue that just came in, and then you're trying to ask them about something else. They're going to land differently than if you were working with them on, some sort of brainstorming session that was pre-planned, instead of just catching them in a hallway or a phone call or something. And so I think it goes back to that same thing we were talking about, trust, right? It's trust between day-to-day interactions and how we want to work together. And when you respect someone's time and they've given you good ideas of how to work within those times, then it continues to build trust and camaraderie. The thing I always am careful with, though, is also know when to remain flexible and reprioritize. Because when you set those instruction manuals, there's certain times where it's like, well, but if it's this, I can change my priority on my off days. And so, oh yeah. I like strong guidelines, not policies, so I always have to leave that flexibility.
No, I like that. And you mentioned blocking off time in your calendar and really getting in the zone. So while we're on that topic of superhuman, one of the other articles they wrote was about flow state and tracking how to get into it for you. Like, at what points do you feel like you're in flow state during the week, time of day? What did you eat before that? What was your sleeping habit before that, kind of thing? And that way you can manufacture flow state. I thought that was also another phenomenal one. And so I'm curious if you have any types of those blocks throughout your day. For example, mine, it's like 10 a.m. to 11:30, that 90-minute block. I'm on fire. Like that for me, for whatever reason, is this huge cognitive boost time when I could tackle any problem, have any difficult phone call or meeting, and I feel like Superman. So have you been able to identify some of those times of day or days of week that really you can just lock in and get into flow state?
Yeah. And that's awesome that you found that, because it's everybody has it. And it's all about how to manifest it more often or when you need it, right? My strategic thinking time is 10 to 12 on Fridays. I don't know what it is, 10 to 12 on Fridays. I'm clear. It's almost like I clear myself of the weekly, daily operations things. And I'm just in a good flow of thinking about the future. This may be when I go down in a rabbit hole of, trying to figure out what that crystal ball might be, but it usually leads to something meaningful. I think the other thing we do here, and this is part of the coaching I had, is it's called flow shifting or alpha shifting sometimes. But then how to be in the flow on one thing and 100% shift to being in flow on a different topic. That's more difficult to do. So in that 90-minute block, can you flow from 5 different things, or do you stay to 1 or 2? And that's a little harder to master, but when you can, it's fantastic. Most of the time, it's consistent sleep, 8 to 8.5 hours of consistent sleep, proper diet, proper hydration, and you can get back in that habit and that flow. But man, if you travel or you have early flights, things like that, it can mess up flow for a week or 2 if you're not careful.
Right. Yeah. I joined a mastermind years ago, and one of the leaders of it, he would have these Mindset Monday calls, and he would talk about, hey, you guys want to increase your cognitive ability. You want to know what the number one highest performance enhancing thing that you can do for your life to get better results in the gym, to make more money, to, like, he just listed off all these things. Everyone's like, yeah. What? We all like paid all this money to be there, right? He's like, sleep.
Yep.
And it just went on to just prove the point that most high performers are chronically sleep deprived, relying on heavy doses of caffeine and nootropics and other types of cognitive enhancers, like, whatever they're taking to, I gotta, clear this brain fog. And it's like, you're averaging 5 hours of sleep at night, man. Yeah. Like, just go. And then you get that rest, and you just, like, you go on vacation, you shut it down, you clear your mind, you come back, and it's like, whoa, I recently just cut caffeine as a personal story about 10 days ago, and I went on vacation. So it was like this double stack of an increase in clarity and cognitive ability. And now after that 10-day period, I still am not back on caffeine, but I just feel phenomenal. And it's just such a testament to what you mentioned, where it's like, when your diet, sleep, and water intake is all dialed, that's when you can do what I call single tasking. You called it like alpha switching, I think. Yeah. But I call it single tasking, because multitasking is like coveted as this ability that's a great thing. But there are tons of studies that talk about how if you switch tasks or are distracted by your phone, even for a split second, it takes you 21 minutes to get back to the depth of thought that you were previously in prior to being broken from that level of concentration. So for me, I'm big on that concept of single tasking. It might be a 90-minute block where I do one thing for 15 minutes, and then I switch to one thing for 20 minutes, and then I switch to, but it's all related to one bigger project. But I really try to, as much as I can, just eliminate distraction, single task. And it seems like that's something that in that training you learned as well.
That's absolutely a thing. Keep doing that. Folks that are, I'll call them self-proclaimed multitaskers or labeled as multitaskers. I think a lot of times they are able to shift quite quickly from project to project, but there's plenty of studies out there that'll show you can't give 100% of your being to more than one thing at a time. And so when you start to multitask, let's say, and you take on multiple tasks and try to do it at the same typing and talking on the phone, you're going to miss what all is being said on the phone if you're trying to type something. And so, it's even distractions too. If you're working on drafting a document and you've got these notifications on your email that ding, it's something that simple that can shift you out and cause you to lose that 20 some minutes of focus. You glance for a second at that pop-up, second, and it costs you so much to get back into the flow of what you were doing. So, it's important. Take time, turn those notifications off. That instruction manual you talked about for yourself, go ahead and say, hey, my service level of responses on my email, for example, is going to be within 24 or 48 hours. Whatever those expectations are that need to be set. If you need me and it's a 911, here's how to communicate with me. Those are all meant to create, efficiency and effectiveness to produce the highest levels of performance you can. It's not always perfect, but you got to take the steps you can to know what ideal is,
Absolutely. And you nailed it. And Tim Ferriss talks about it in this way. He says, if you're screen printing shirts and you have one shirt to screen print, it takes you the same amount of time to produce one shirt as it does to produce 100 shirts. So, why wouldn't, because you have to change the screens. There are these different types of time consuming costs that go in that just eat up time when you have to go from one design to another. And that's why, when you're getting shirts, there's like batches of 12 or batches of however many is a minimum order, because they're not going to screen print one shirt. Now there's a different process called direct to garment. That's a whole different thing that just laser prints one thing and it can constantly switch. But this concept of batching, I have applied to so many things in my life. And I've gone on a low information diet, shut off notifications like the little bells on my computer, a lot of the notifications on my phone. I had 0 a couple years ago and I went really strict on this. And then I brought a couple of key ones back, but then I get to them in batches. And it also trains everyone in your life that that's the expectation. If you're training them that when they text you, you get back to them immediately, they're going to keep texting you and it might annoy you, but they don't know that. And so if instead when you're locked in, they know that like you're not going to get back to them for a couple hours, then that's the expectation. Right. And so, all of this just increases the productivity and the communication levels to you and your team members, which gets more done, helps you make more money, helps you impact more people. So I think these are really important topics to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes by default, if you're not available, they end up having to make a decision or something, and then just always being sure you high five them and say thanks for making the decision rather than wait. Yep.
They figure out themselves. They make the decision, and that's another concept. If you're a leader that is having difficulty with the people on your team that you're leading asking you too many questions where you'd rather them just figure it out, you could give a dollar amount and say, if this decision is going to impact our firm less than $500 or less than $5,000 or whatever that number is, make the decision on your own. That's what Ritz-Carlton does with their frontline and their managers. They give their frontline employees up to $500 to make a decision in the moment to fix a guest issue. And they say to their managers up to $5,000 to immediately remedy an issue, right? So what that does is it helps clear the channels farther up the chain so that the executive leaders can focus on strategy rather than getting all these escalated customer complaints, which could have been handled at lower management levels. And I think it's a really smart model. I mean, eat it, move forward, empower the frontline team members that are dealing with customers on a daily basis. And it's a really smart way to help free up your time.
That's right. And to be clear, those individuals that have the $500 to $5,000 limits, they're putting power in the hands of the people who are closest to the problem or opportunity. They're going to know exactly what the issue is. They're going to understand what the right thing to do is. And so just give them the confidence to know that they have latitude. It reduces the red tape. And if you think about what we talked about earlier, how much more trust does that customer now have that they got their issue resolved face to face in the moment? It builds brand awareness. And they're going to say, hey, I had a great experience. or I had a negative experience, which turned into a great experience because they solved my issue in the moment. That's great,
No, I agree. And I like the conversation that we've had today on this podcast because it could help literally any entrepreneur in the world. This is not even just a real estate discussion about raising capital for grocery stores or how to grade and develop lots in a way that and structure the grocery store to the car wash to the retail outlets that makes the most sense. Like this is something that is applicable to everyone. So I really appreciate all of the things we've talked about today. I'm curious if there's a question that I should have asked you or anything that you'd like to expand upon from earlier.
I would say one thing is, what are we doing that I'll say presents a competitive advantage over others? And I think that was maybe something we talked about or was in the pre-recording discussion. But it's interesting because when you think about competitive advantages, they come and go as quickly as they're defined if you don't protect them. And so I guess I just want to kind of talk more about that culture piece of your organization, your being, and your growth, because I think that if you anchor on to that vision, mission, core values, you build a culture around it, the competitive advantage exists with your people and their ability to deliver the best results, very much like the Ritz-Carlton example you just gave. And so maybe just as a last thought, I would urge people to really take a look at that and make sure that that's core and fundamental. And you don't have to be a large organization to start. You can be an individual on your own, but start with that vision, mission, core values and understand as you grow or what experience you're going to leave for those customers you work with and define it and stay true to it. Because I think that is that foundational piece of that trust that will allow people to compete, to be successful and to earn business.
Great points. Really appreciate you touching on that. How can listeners contact you?
Best way is through our website. As you saw, it's pretty robust. And so our team does a great job of fielding incoming questions and thoughts and commentary. And that's the best way.
Awesome. And, really appreciate having you on. Curt Frost, everyone. He's based in Florida, but his firm is nationwide. And it's been a phenomenal discussion about some of the entrepreneurial habits that have gotten you to where you are today. Like I said before, easily applicable to anyone in any industry. So I'm sure this will be a podcast that I share a lot and really appreciate the discussion that we had. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you want to accomplish your real estate goals, then I highly suggest downloading my free Ultimate Real Estate Goal Setting Framework. The link is in the description of the show, and it will help you break down your annual income goal into the amount of phone calls, appointments, or open houses you need in order to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.